I'm Peter. This is Allie. Of course, we are the content coordinators on the Supplier Wiki team here at SupplyPike. Our main job is to create webinars like this, to create articles, to create kind of outward-facing content that is always free and something that suppliers can engage with. So please, we'll put our emails in later on. Please let us know if there's anything that you'd like for us to cover, anything that you're curious about that you'd like for us to talk about. And we'd love to be able to help you with that. Alrighty, so here's what we're going to kind of walk through today. We're going to go through kind of some basics of shortage deductions, right? We're going to talk about why we're talking about shortage deductions. We're going to go into some of the specifics, some that are more common than others. Then we'll finally get into the disputing process for invalid shortage deductions. We'll have a little Q&A section like we always do. And then we're going to go through a bonus demo of Deductions Navigator for those of you who have expressed interest in that. Deductions Navigator, we're so proud of here at SupplyPike. I am so proud of Deductions Navigator. It's such a wonderful tool. So hopefully you will stay on and join us for that as well. Okay, here's some frequently asked questions. Will you be receiving a copy of the slide deck? Yes, in about 3 to 4 business, we'll be sending these out to all of you. So don't feel like you need to take too rigorous of notes as we're going through. Sometimes that helps me focus and stay kind of in the zone while I'm consuming anything of this sort. So if that helps your learning process, absolutely go for it. But you will also be receiving a copy of the deck in a few days. Also, a little kind of side note, just to help us sort of process the questions that are coming through and to help all of you feel like whatever questions you want. If you have a comment that's for the whole chat that you want everyone to see, go ahead and leave that in the webinar chat, which some of you have done already to talk about your resolutions. But if you have more of a question proper for me and Allie, you have more of a question about some of the content that we're going through, go ahead and put that in the Q&A tab, which is separate there at the bottom of your Zoom screen. That way we'll be able to kind of determine, is this something that we're going to cover later? Or is this something that we should save to the end? Should I ask this question a little bit earlier on, or what have you? So those are our two kind of main functions for communicating with each other here. If, as we're going through, you have some kind of crucial insight that you would like to share from your own business experience with shortages, please share that in the chat. One of the things that we love doing the most here is connecting you guys to each other, creating a space where suppliers can share information and share insights with each other. So please use that function. But if you have more of a question proper, go ahead and put that in the Q&A section. All right, so SupplyPike, our main goal is to help suppliers reduce revenue loss. That's our main kind of focus for the future. The way that we've been doing that in the past is through helping people fight invalid AP deductions. Now we're moving into a little bit more of the AR chargebacks kind of area, which we won't be getting into too much today, but that's how we kind of started. And right now we're just kind of trying to grow into a new space of revenue loss prevention. So again, if there's any kind of rev loss situation that your company is experiencing, please share that with us. We would love to know what you guys are going through, and we'd love to help you with that. And here are some of our partners right here that we have listed below at the bottom of the screen. Some people that we're very proud to be working with. As we always like to say, hopefully we could see your company up there someday too.
All right.
Go ahead and take it away, Allie.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So today we're talking about shortages, and we're talking about shortages specifically at Walmart. So let's get into the content. First off, let's start by defining what a shortage deduction is. If you're new to Walmart or you're new to CPG retail, the definition of a shortage deduction should look pretty consistent across the board. However, the way that it's executed in billing or being paid back or disputing is going to look pretty different. So we'll start at the high level and then we'll kind of get down into the nitty gritty of how Walmart views this and how to dispute these. So what is a shortage deduction? A shortage deduction is in any scenario when a retailer withholds payment from an invoice, claiming they did not receive some or all of the goods for an invoice. So pretty cut and dry example. Let's say you ship 100 cases, but Walmart only pays you for 80 because they say they've only received 80 or only 80 were usable. Maybe they were damaged. You're going to see a shortage deduction. And that's going to come in the form of an accounts payable. So what will happen instead of a fine, Walmart saying, hey, you owe us this amount of money, they're just going to go ahead and deduct the money that you owe them off of your invoice. So here's a really great, easy example of what a shortage would look like. So here's a code 24 example, but essentially the supplier's invoice would be deducted for the shortage. And in this case, the invoice was supposed to include a lemon juice box, a grapefruit juice box, and a pomegranate juice box. But what actually happened was the lemon juice boxes were the only ones that were received for some reason. So you're actually going to owe Walmart or be deducted off of the full invoice check for the amount of the grapefruit and the pomegranate juice. So what causes shortage deductions? There's a couple different reasons. And again, please feel free to add any others that you want to in the chat, but these are kind of the four main ones that we usually see that constantly repeat depending on the different shortage codes. So the first one is poor labeling. That can be anything from the color labels. So let's say going back to the juice boxes, you put all of those in one vendor pack and you're actually shortaged for the juices that not received because they were in a box that was just labeled lemon totally. So it comes out to an overage because it looks like you shipped 9. So here it looks like you shipped 9 lemon juice boxes where in fact, because of the poor labeling, you really shipped the correct products, but that's not what it said on the color or the text label. One call out for poor labeling here too is SQEP. We just did a webinar on SQEP, Peter and I, on Tuesday, and this kind of filters in here. So poor labeling can really hit you in a lot of different areas, and one of those being SQEP, the Supplier Quality Excellence Program. And we can talk a little bit about that later, or you can definitely go check out some of the examples we have for content on what poor labeling, how it can affect you in the form of a fine in the Supplier Quality Excellence Program. The second reason for a shortage deduction is going to be human error. And when I say human error, that can happen anywhere in the supply chain process. Obviously, it can be the accountability of the supplier, so it can be a valid shortage deduction, or it can be an invalid deduction, meaning something happened with either your 3PL or at the Walmart receivable process. We've seen a lot with the manual receivable process at a DC or an FC being the issue for shortages. So we'll get into kind of the solves for that, but human error is obviously one that factors in and can be really difficult to actually prove an invalid charge. The third reason for a shortage deduction would be a mismatched order. So could be items being shipped differently. This could be an invoice arriving before the shipment. If you're invoicing before you ship, you're going to have unearned revenue, and this is going to create an accounting issue, and that can also create some of those issues. So we'll get into some of the ways mismatched orders can occur, and then also how the invoicing arriving before the shipment can create issues with the Walmart approval process and how that kind of comes out into the shortages. All right. And before we get deeper into some of the codes and the reasons and why you can dispute some of these deduction charges, I wanted to frame up the difference between the three the 3 programs for revenue loss at Walmart. So the one we're talking about today is the one on the left-hand side, and that's deductions. So deductions are AP, so accounts payable deductions, and they come off the check. So if your check is $100 and you are seeing only 80, there's going to be that deduction of whatever you owed is that $20. Luckily, invalid deductions can be disputed and won with the right documentation. And because this program's been around, it's a little bit more defined than some of the other programs at Walmart. We'll get into the programs and applications used for disputing today just a little bit. But if you're interested in learning a little bit about how to use the accounts payable dispute portal, APDP, where you can dispute your AP deduction claims, we're having a webinar next week on December 15th, I believe, where we're going to go through that. Yesterday, we just talked about settlement at Walmart and the issues that's creating for suppliers who have always done settlement and haven't had to individually dispute. So if you're in that group of people, I would highly recommend joining the APDP webinar. And we're also planning lots of content in the future to help that transition from settlement to disputing more manually and individually here in the new year. All right. And then to go into OTIF and SWEP fines just a little bit today, again, we've got lots of content on this. So if you're unfamiliar, please go ahead and check those out. Peter can drop some of those in the chat. But if not, we've got tons of articles, webinars, recorded in-person events, you name it, we've got it, content on both SWEP and OTIF. And both of these are more of similar than deductions. There is overlap in the impact for deductions, OTIF and SWEP fines. You can get one of each on a single PO, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But OTIF and SWEP fines really share a lot of commonalities in terms of the way that they're charged and where you can dispute them. So I'll cover that really quick, but again, go ahead and check out some of the other content we have on that for a deeper dive. So AR charges are come in the form of fines to suppliers. So instead of it being taken off of your check, OTIF fines are additional payments you owe to Walmart as a supplier because of supply chain inefficiencies or defects. OTIF stands for on time and in full, which is a pretty common practice across the supply chain industry, having your products come on time and for the correct amount that you owe. And then the SQEP program is kind of a blanket program for all supplier quality excellence. And that comes in the form of PO accuracy, ASNs, labels, barcodes, you name it, it's going to be under that blanket. And again, go check out more of that for the deeper dive. These are not shortage deductions. However, because of the implications of shortage deductions in the supply chain, you will possibly see an OTIF fine for a deduction or a SQEP fine for the same deduction. And then last thing I'll touch on the OTIF and SQEP fines is that they're both disputable. They have their own kind of rhythms and formulas. They're on a monthly occurrence, both of them. And if you want to mark those in your calendars, we just uploaded our Walmart fiscal 2024 calendar. And we haven't updated the OTIF and SQEP fine calendar yet, but you can go ahead and mark those dates in there if you know kind of what the rhythm's going to look like for your particular business. But we'll go ahead and auto mark those once Walmart releases that information. But again, these occur on a monthly basis, and they're both disputed in High Radius, which is a application that is outside of Retail Link, the Walmart supplier portal. So you actually have to ask for access to this. And if you haven't, please go check out those webinars that have the application process available. All right, so let's get back to our deductions conversation. And like I was saying before, the impact of shortages can create this waterfall effect. So essentially, let's say you get that code 24 deduction, it creates a PO defect, and then that failure to ship in full can hurt your score. It could create an in full fine. Let's say that there was an issue with the barcode that was creating an issue with it being in full. That's going to come out to a SQEP fine. So as you can see, these fines, while they can be kind of minuscule numbers depending on the size of your business, they really start to add up. And because the settlement process is going away for deductions, it's a lot harder for suppliers to say, let's write that off as a business expense. There's always going to be some leakage in the supply chain and in cost and in expenses. It's just getting more and more expensive, tedious, and manual to do that. So we're going to get into how you can fight that here in a second. All right, but before we do that, we're going to go through some of the common shortages that we see. We work with, I don't even know how many suppliers now, upwards of 400. And we are able to see the amount of shortages that come through. I know we've processed like over 1 million shortages just this year in our application, Deductions Navigator. So we do have a pretty good pulse on what most suppliers are facing and how to fight those. So as I was kind of referring to, here is a list of the top codes, and the vast majority of shipping related Walmart AP deductions are listed here. So as you can see, code 22, code 24, and code 25 are shipping related or shortage related. And those are the top ones that suppliers face on a reoccurring basis in terms of the AP deductions that they're fighting. All right, so let's talk about code 22, which stands for goods billed, not shipped. So what is this code stand for? It means that the quantity of the item on the invoice does not match the quantity that the facility says that it received. So the invoice says that they wanted some of the grape juice boxes, or not grape juice, grapefruit juice boxes and the pomegranate boxes. But when it was received to the facility, there's a shortage. They didn't receive that case of the pomegranate juice. So what happened? In this scenario, the bill of lading, or BOL, was stamped as received in full at the facility, but the invoice that was transmitted for the quantities greater than what the facility claimed to receive. And when disputing this, it often involves proving that the invoice quantity matches the received quantity. All right, and then going into code 24s, and you're going to see between code 22s, code 24s, and code 25s, there's a very similar problem happening in terms of the shortages, but it's important to understand why Walmart has marked it as a code 22 versus a code 24 versus a code 25, so that you can dispute and have the best chance of disputing with an approval coming through instead of those getting rejected. So for a code 24, it is when receiving the shipment, the facility signs the BOL as short against the quantities that the shipment was said to contain. So what happens here is code 24s are when the shipper invoices for more than what the facility claims to have received and or what the shipment has said to contain. So here, the disputing involves proving the invoice quantity matches the received quantity. And between the code 22s and code 24s, code 22s is about matching that invoice. So they're going to deduct based on the that difference, whereas for code 24s, it's more of a receipt issue. So it's about finding the difference between that receipt and then the difference between the invoice. And we'll get into how you dispute these here after we kind of go through the full definitions of these codes. All right. Code 25 stands for no merchandise received for the invoice. So what does that mean? Walmart claims that they haven't received any merchandise for the invoice transmitted. Therefore, code 25 deductions will always be for the full amount of the invoice. So similar to what what's a little bit different about code 25s is that the full invoice is not received. So this could be, 5 more of the pomegranate juice cases. And if what Walmart sees in their system is going to be a missing 5 cases, no matter what it is, and it will be for that full amount. And disputing this type of code involves proving that these items were received for the invoice in question. And we'll kind of talk about this here in a second, but essentially code 25s are going to be a timing issue. That's when what's probably happening here is you're sending the invoice ahead of the actual shipment arriving to the Walmart facility. So we'll talk about MABDs here in a second, but again, MABD and practicing to schedule the invoice to be sent on that. So making sure that the invoice isn't arriving too early. Best practice here is to send out about 1 to 2 weeks after that. Sending the invoice a little bit later than the MABD date can cause issues, but again, Walmart is sometimes reviewing their payments depending on payment terms. If it's 30 net 60, they're going to go towards that 60 date. So sending your invoice a little bit later rather than earlier is usually the best practice here. And then that last point to call out is do not re-invoice goods once they're delivered. I know it can be tempting if you're getting a code here to just re-invoice if it says that you've got a code 25. This will actually trigger another code that you won't be able to dispute because code 30s are for resending the invoice. So just go ahead, and if you do come across this issue, you're getting a code 25, go ahead and just dispute it. And the proof there would look like sending proof documentation that outlines that it wasn't shorted, you just sent the invoice earlier than expected. And that was what was creating the discrepancy in the Walmart system. And then this is more OTIF example, but you can see how these two programs can overlap. So if you're sending the invoice ahead of the actual shipment, that's going to create issues. So just know your MABD dates. And then here is kind of an example of the different delivery windows. Again, we're going to send you this deck, so don't feel like you need to screenshot. But if you want to review your MABD dates, you can find that in Retail Link. All right, let's go on to Code 21's concealed shortages. We have seen a lot more of these this year than in recent years. And it really comes down to the way that you're packing, however your products are packed, depending on warehouse packs, vendor packs, how the overall packaging can conceal a shortage. So basically the shortage isn't visible when the facility first receives your shipment, but then when it's opened up, let's say you send the vendor pack to a DC and then the warehouse packs go out to various stores and they realize, hey, you're missing one for whatever reason. It could be broken in the warehouse pack, or maybe we go back to the juice examples here. You were supposed to have 2 of the lemon juices and 2 of the pomegranate juices, and you've marked each one of those with a yellow sticker indicating that they're all supposed to be lemon, even if that's not the case. Just making sure that your warehouse packs are really clearly labeled so you're not receiving a code 21 shortage. All right, and you're going to see another theme here. How code 22, 24, and 25 were pretty similar. Some of these next ones here, like the code 21 we just covered and code 14, feel a little bit similar, as well as some of the other ones coming down the pipe. So again, you can see how it can be confusing if you're not clear about the different codes and what they mean and how to dispute those for the particular example. Walmart only gives you that code number, and then you can go find, this stands for short and damaged, but what is the larger story there? A great resource if you don't have access to it yet I would go onto our website, Supplier Wiki, and download in the resources tab, the deductions codes explained. It's got basically everything that is in here, as well as any of the other deduction codes. There's over 75. So go ahead and download that. It breaks down what the deduction codes are, like we're doing today, how to prevent them, how to dispute them, the supporting documentation, and kind of breaking that down if it applies to collector prepaid suppliers. So we'll get back to code 24 here. That stands for short and damaged. It is when there's a damage or shortage to the merchandise received at the Walmart facility, and the trailer was sealed and not opened until delivery. So here in this situation, the trailer's pulling up, they're about to unload it into the DC. They open it up and they see that the juice has sadly leaked out and it's all over the place. We've seen messy trailers before. So it's going to say that, this is not the fault of the carrier. This is something that happened in the packing process of the trailer, and the accountability at that point goes to the supplier. So damages and shortages are likely the result of poor packaging, like I said before, and mishandling by the carrier. Code 14s are commonly taken as rededucts after a code 22 or 24 is paid back. So these can be a little bit harder to dispute. And we'll kind of get into how you could fight these. But again, if they come as 22, 24s, it can bounce back to the supplier and say, actually, we're saying that this is short and damaged because this is not the fault of Walmart packaging these products. They should have been packaged more properly. Pause here about packaging. If you are seeing this process happen a lot, if you're having these code 14s pretty often and it is under your accountability, I would go ahead and review the Walmart supplier packaging standards. It's a PDF. It's actually searchable on any search engine. I use Google Chrome and I just type in Walmart supplier packaging standards. Make sure you have the most up-to-date one, but it's 200 pages letting you know exactly how Walmart expects packaging to work for all of their items. It's got lots of great examples. Very dull read, but super helpful if you're seeing this issue and it's your accountability and you're not able to dispute it. So I'd review that. All right, code 15s feel pretty similar to code 14. So this is about the pallets shrink wrap. So the definition is there's damage to or a shortage of merchandise on a palletized or shrink wrapped shipment that is unable to see until the pallet was unwrapped. So kind of similar if we go back to this picture here. Let's say this wasn't a vendor pack, it was a warehouse pack, but the box around the warehouse pack is your shrink wrap. That is concealing essentially the issue. Code 15s are also commonly taken as rededucts after a code 24, 22 is paid back. So these are pretty hard to dispute, especially when it's a rededuct. Something that is not a common practice, but again, we have seen suppliers doing this because they just keep getting code 14s or code 15s, is taking a picture of the inventory before it goes out. So it's at your facility, and depending on if you're collector prepaid, it goes out, and for some reason it's getting damaged. Taking pictures of it ahead of time when it's packed into the truck is something that some suppliers have done during their dispute process because we're seeing these so many. That's not necessarily always feasible, and I know that's pretty tedious, but that is something we have seen some suppliers doing, especially when this is a prevalent code they're seeing on a regular basis. All right, code 23s. So what is it? This is when the order arrives short and the BOL has been signed, shipper load and count. So shipper load and count indicates that it was the shipper's responsibility to load the truck, confirms the quantities, and because the carrier was not responsible for validating the quantities, the shortage falls on the supplier. These are pretty rare. And with Walmart, they're usually going to use code 22s or code 24s. So if you're seeing these, we're going to talk a little bit about ways you can fight this code 23 here in a second with SLCs in particular. And Peter, I think that you're popping on because we have a question.
Yes, you're right. Yes, we have one question that isn't exactly related to this. It's a question about code 25s, but I figured it was kind of relevant because we're talking about 3PLs a little bit, and we're talking about kind of the communication issues that can happen between, Walmart suppliers and 3PLs. So one of our guests has a question. If I receive a claim with code 25 and I have the BOL signed by the contractor, and Walmart is requesting the BOL with the stamp of receipt from them, how can I dispute this charge?
Okay, let's see. So you're saying that the BOL was signed, showing that the driver said that it was picked up in full, but it's not stamped with what stamp? Sorry.
So they received the BOL from the contractor. Walmart is requesting the BOL with the stamp of receipt from them, which I think means the contractor. So I think in this case, the 3PL has given the supplier a confirmation of having picked it up. And what Walmart wants is the confirmation that the 3PL has dropped it off, if that makes sense.
Okay. That should work. I'm confused on why it's not. I mean, the other supporting documentation, if they're not taking that, is that any freight bill. So for that bill of lading, if it's signed by the driver showing that it's picked up in full, I don't understand why the stamp additionally is creating an issue. Maybe we have seen Walmart reject when they aren't able to see the purchase number that's clearly noted on the document. So I would say make sure that is happening as well. And then, including the invoice showing the order quantity should match up. But if you're still seeing issues with this, please, sometimes it is case by case and we have to get into the nitty gritty details when it's not working for code 25. So if you want support with this particular code at the end, please email us and we'll get you in contact with our team of experts who work on disputing these daily. So again, I'm trying to validate here that it sounds like what you're doing should be working, but it's not. So I'm sorry if that's making you feel really frustrated, but let us help you with that because I know that can be such a tedious process when the things that should work are not. Thanks for that question, Peter. All right, so I'm gonna keep moving along here in the content. Let's see what the next code we're talking about is. Perfect. We are going to talk about how to avoid common shortage deductions, and then we'll get into how to dispute some of these codes. All right. Avoiding the standard shortage issues, we're going to kind of start with table stakes with item setup and invoicing. This should be pretty common knowledge to most of our seasoned suppliers, but if you're new to Walmart or you're new to the retail CPG world, these are pretty basic things that your team is probably already doing, but it's always great to just check to make sure that this is something that is occurring. All right. First thing is to submit only one invoice per PO when possible. I know sometimes there are errors or you feel the urge to resubmit an invoice, but kind of like the example we had before, that might trigger a code 30 and you'll have to fight that. So try to submit one invoice per PO when possible. And then the second point here is confirm your item setups. If you're new to using Walmart's item setup application, Item 360, we have a webinar covering that. And it's really important to go in. There's lots of information you can check in your item setups, but the ones that are really going to create issues if they're not correct are UPCs, GTNs, costing, and then that your pack quantity is correct. That is very important, especially make sure that you have the correct vendor pack quantities and warehouse pack quantities. Another issue I've seen several times that starts in Nova is when Nova requires warehouse pack quantities for some of their forms when you're editing POs and people put in vendor pack quantities. That's going to automatically create issues if whether it's a shortage deduction or an OTIF fine or SQEP fine. You might see all three for that. So just ensure that you have those UPCs and GTNs right, that your costing is right, pack quantity is correct. There's lots of other things like item description. And again, those are always important. But if you're going in just to see, you know, I'm always getting shortages and I think it's at item setup, that's where I would look first. Next point here is transmitting the invoices and Walmart item numbers. I know that teams have their own internal numbers, but just to help align with what Walmart item numbers are, that's going to make it a lot clearer. Just speaking in the context that they're familiar with will help kind of shore up any of that miscommunication. And then the last point here, match your invoice to the PTO and don't the PO and don't make adjustments on the invoice that don't match the PO. This is really important. Again, things happen. You need to make edits to the PO. You're having a conversation with your buyer, and you know they need more inventory or they want to do a program. So for this, I would just really make sure that you're aligned. And if you do have a change that's driven by a need from your buyer team, they can make these changes in Nova for you. But, you know, if that's depending on the relationship with your buyer, I would say just make sure you're very clear. And if there are changes that you're reflecting those in the invoice, if that's something that was created, if a shortage was created because of this change, have a conversation with your team, and they can also help you with some of that documentation. All right, and then we're going to get into packaging and labeling here. And again, a lot of these particular best practices can also be applied to OTIF, and they can also especially be applied to SQEP. SQEP deals with pallets. It deals with the way that loads are packed. It deals with barcode labeling, PO accuracy. So these also apply to shortages, but again, you're going to see the waterfall effect if you're not doing these in a SQEP fine. And a key point, since I'm talking about SQEP fines, they come out at different times than your AP deductions. They're on different schedules. So if you're disputing one and you have successful disputes in AP deductions, make sure you're saving that documentation, especially if you think it's going to be an issue of barcode and labeling, because you're going to see it in the SQEP fine. And if you don't, that's count your lucky stars, because it's probably going to just come out as a SQEP fine in the next couple of months. All right, packaging and labeling though, for shortages. Do not master pack different items. We kind of showed this in the example earlier with the master pack. It can conceal what is inside of that on the different inventory. So a great thing to point out here is if you are doing this and it's a part of getting it to the DC and then distributing out, be very clear about the barcode that you put on each item. Since we do have a manual receiving process since there is a manual receiving process at Walmart, even colored stickers has been a great way to solve problems, especially at this time of year when there's lots of inventory coming into the DCs. If you're shipping something like phone cases and the differentiator is color, put a colored sticker on there, you know, a huge orange tag and a huge green tag just to differentiate. But key there is just don't master pack different items. It can create a lot of confusion. Go ahead and just ship them in different orders, even if it's not at the same time. Ship them differently, because it will just make things a lot simpler for the receiving process. Another call out is to use slip sheets between POs if palletizing freight. Identify the PO number and facility number on labels. And if you are curious on the format that Walmart wants, go back to that shipping standards Walmart guide for all their labels. It's very helpful. Make sure your labels are clearly applied, not damaged or obfuscated. Again, very table stakes, but these things happen. So we've seen some suppliers who are just testing new things, seeing how the durability, and there's lots of great vendors that are working on that. Again, I know I've talked about the color coding so many times, but it's really helped a lot of suppliers we've worked with use color coding imagery to differentiate between products. And then this one's pretty secondary. I would say differentiating between products has been where it's most helpful, but we have seen some suppliers who are using color coding to differentiate between orders. All right. Now let's get into the meat of today, talking about disputing the shortage deductions and some of the documentation you need for these deduction disputes. All right, so the first step is know that being in the retail CPG world, especially with Walmart, be prepared for invalid shortages. It's going to happen. So the first thing is go ahead and generate a store and packing list that can match your invoice and ASNs. It's going to save you a lot of time if you're doing that manually all the time. So just go ahead and generate that, have it ready, and it can be a great jumping off point for proof documentation. Another part of this is depending on the lane that you're in, gathering proof documentation. So if you're collect, always require carriers to sign the BOL and store these documents. And then if you're prepaid, collect those PODs ahead of time, or your 3PLs do not store them in perpetuity. So storage with these proof documentations is a huge barrier to getting your disputes validated and paid back. The issue here is a lot of PODs are not stored when you're prepaid. So I think the timeline for most of those is 90 days and then they're gone. Walmart allows you to go back and dispute post-date 2 years for AP deductions. So when you know that you're losing all of those PODs in mere weeks, when you can go back 2 years, it can be really frustrating and hinder that process. So if you can save those as much as possible, I would recommend that. We've got solutions for that we can talk about. But again, saving those in whatever way works best for you is the key recommendation there. All right. And then be prepared for, when continuing to be prepared for invalid shortages, ensure that all the shipping documents include the necessary. If your shipping documents don't include that, you kind of like the example that Peter mentioned, you might be dinged and they won't accept your BOL or your POD. So make sure that it's clear that the PO number is on the shipping document, the ship to address, the item and shipment info, and then signatures. And kind of calling back to code 23s, if you're collect, avoid the SLC, so the shipper load and count when possible. Walmart will always make mistakes. And if the SLC can make it very difficult to fight these invalid shortages. So if there's a way that you can have that conversation to avoid SLC, that would be our recommendation, because again, it becomes a he said, she said situation, and that makes it always difficult to fight these invalid shortages. Okay, so what do you need to dispute a Walmart shortage deduction? One of the OG supply pipe people has always said that the supplier is guilty until proven innocent, and Walmart places the burden of proof on you. So we like to include that in here because we understand that that burden of proof can weigh really heavily, especially when it's not just one AP deduction, but you're just bombarded with whatever number it is. We see up to like 200 at a time, 500 at a time. It can get unruly. So in general, you're going to need basic information about the claim, the invoice and shipment, and then proof documentation that supports your dispute. And here is a quick outline of the tools that can help you pull that information depending on the different codes. And again, we've got webinars covering APDP, which is going to be the place that you'll actually execute those disputes. But before you even go into execute, our recommendation is to start in the accounting scorecard on Retail Link. If you have trouble accessing those, go ahead and contact your Retail Link admin, and they can help you get into the accounting scorecard APIS and or APDP. So accounting scorecard really serves as a temperature check, and it's helping measure that invoice accuracy. So if you're seeing code 22s, code 24s, code 25s, it's a great place to start and check those. And then EDI accuracy. With APIS, you can go from the accounting scorecard and start pulling those details that can help you link up to your proof documentation. So it's the storage, invoice claims and storage. And I believe it goes back 2 years too. Don't quote me on that. I know that it goes back for a lot longer than your actual PODs or BOLs would be stored. But I think it's for 2 years. Again, don't quote me on that, but it helps you view and pull payment, invoice, checks, and claims information, which can be really helpful when you're going into APDP to execute your deductions. I would check before you go in disputing. Most of the shortage disputes you can dispute in APDP, but I know some of the ones that cover allowances you cannot dispute. So just check before you go in so you're not, hitting your head against the keyboard. I've been when you think that you can go in and dispute something in APDP, but not. Again, we're going to cover that in our webinar here next week. So there's a lot of tabs to have open. I understand between your carriers and your shipping documents and APIS and accounting scorecard. But with shipping documents, it's the reason that you need these is that they help really prove that the items on the invoice were picked up and or delivered in full. And if you're having trouble accessing these, depending if you're collect or prepaid, really just start with those conversations, how you can get the signed bill of lading. If you do need that stamp, if that's something that's hindering you, creating that into the part of the process. It can be really frustrating when you can't actually dispute because of something that's not included. So really outlining that if you're prepaid or collect. But again, shipping documents are one of the key pieces that are used across all of the shortage claims. All right, and with that, we have a couple minutes for questions, and I am ready to get into it. Peter, how are you feeling?
Yes, absolutely. We've got lots of questions to go through, so we will try to get through those in the next 7 to 10 minutes before we hop onto Deductions Navigator. Real quickly, there was one question that we got in advance that I wanted to just kind of address and answer here real quick. How does Walmart check in their merchandise? There's a large discrepancy in what our company shipped, and it must be what they received or checked in, as nothing else explains the gap. Any information you can provide would be helpful. So what we know about how they actually kind of receive is it's through scanning the GTINs. So that's the specific kind of barcode that is indicating that exact shipment. We know that it's also still a pretty manual process. There's a few kind of more experimental automated stuff that they're trying out now, and that they will almost certainly transition to in the next couple of months or years. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, those discrepancies between what they say has arrived and what you believe has arrived, that's where all of the kind of magic is happening in terms of disputing and all of that. So yeah, that's out of the way. We're going to get into some of our more questions from this particular talk. Let's start here. For center point loads, do we need a copy of the MBOL attached to each DC's underlying, or is one copy for the entire load all that is needed? Does that make sense to you? There's a lot of terms there that I think might be a little
Yeah,
confusing.
I think you cut out a little bit for me, Peter. But if you could read the question again, I can also pull it up here for myself, just so I make
Yes. Yeah, this is in the Q&A still section. So for center point loads, do we need a copy of the MBOL attached to each DC's underlying, or is one copy for the entire load all that is needed?
Okay, perfect. Here's what I would say. If what you're doing currently is creating problems, then I would go ahead and try the other option. With Walmart, really with any large retailer, if you can over communicate and create something that is proactive, then I would do that. So if you're attaching one now to your load, if you're just the overall, or if you're doing the DC underlining, I would just go ahead, if you're not doing that already, to go and attach that instead of one copy for the entire load. If people have something that they've done that before and plugged and played it and it has not worked, please put that in the chat. But again, my kind of rule of thumb overall is over communicate, try to be as proactive as possible with these large retailers because of the amount of shipments they pull in every day. It creates so much room for error. So I know it might be a little bit more tedious, but it could save you time spent on the back end fighting deductions. So if you have more questions on this, we'll put our emails here up in a second when we're through the Q&A portion, but that would be my larger recommendation rather than maybe getting into the nitty-gritty details. I think I need a little bit more to understand. So.
Okay, great. We had one question about, can we elaborate on what kind of automation and receiving is coming? I don't think that we really can. What I've personally heard is that they're putting cameras in everywhere. So it's going to be, I think that a big change is on the horizon. Ali, do you want to comment on that at all? Or is there anything that you've heard that's different?
Yeah, I'll just kind of put a disclaimer on what you just said, Peter. So we're interpreting what we've seen. We talk to a lot of suppliers. We try to stay up to date on the information. So when we're saying that there is automation coming in receiving, this is being built out of what we've seen from other suppliers who have had conversations with their Walmart teams and some more understanding into the SQUEB Supplier Quality Excellence Program. They're adding additional automation for the receival process. It's what they've been referring to it as vision technology. So essentially, not having a human look at your actual box, looking at your label and barcode, but just whether it's coming in and being scanned on a conveyor belt, and that is the only time that it is actually being, I'm using air quotes, my camera's not on, but being read per se. So that's kind of what we've heard. And additional to that, what we have heard from lots of credible sources is that this vision technology, the automation for barcode and labeling, is rolling out to every DC by the beginning of this fiscal year for Walmart. The implications of that will create an increased amount of SQUEB fines for those who do not have their barcode and labeling in check with what Walmart standards are. And it's going to create so many pain points on the disputing and deductions front as well. So that's what we're talking about when we're commenting on the automation in receiving process. So that's already piloted and a part of the process at some DCs. I don't have the particular ones in front of me, but it's supposed to roll out to every single DC in this upcoming year.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarification.
Yeah.
One more question here. Are taking pictures necessary to prevent quantity shortages?
So that's a great question. And I'll kind of go back to my other claim. If you can be as proactive as possible, that's going to serve you better. So if taking pictures seems to be a solution for quantity shortages, so it's going into the truck, you've had so many issues with one particular DC or something like that. You take a picture of the exact cases. Nothing is obscured. You can see that there's no concealed shortages. That might be something just to hold on to do with like a couple different orders. If you're seeing that out of one particular DC, you're getting hit with so many different shortages. That would be my recommendation. It is not required. I will say that. But if you're having something where you feel like you just cannot get in front of a particular problem with a shortage, that is one solution we have seen that has been executed and helped suppliers understand the issue, whether that was an invalid reason or that was a valid reason. So that would be, I would say, don't do it if you're not seeing a chronic issue, because it can become very tedious and can slow other processes down. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. One quick question we have here. How about deductions for DSD suppliers?
Deductions for DSD suppliers direct
to store delivery. Yeah.
Yeah. Any context would be helpful for that. We can give you information on if it was a certain type. I could probably help a little bit more. I'm more familiar with some of the overarching codes that we see for, code 22s, code 24s, the ones we've discussed today. But if you want further information, I would go look at the deduction code explained that we have. It might have something for DSD specifically, but again, having those codes is the way that I start from understanding how what the issue is and how to solve it. So we can get a code there.
So a couple of the he's mentioned codes 25s and 21s for DSD. Can we say the receiving associates and their quality of work is the most important cause of code 25s and 21s?
You can definitely say that, but I don't know if that will be accepted and approved in a dispute. I would say clarifying for more questions. So if you're getting a lot of code 21s, that's going to be a concealed shortage. It means it's not visible. So how you can prevent those, obviously table stakes, ship in full per what the PO is, and just having it really down packed that your packaging and labeling is correct. It may be an issue with different items. That distinction has hurt a lot of suppliers who aren't distinguishing those different items. Make sure that's clear. Again, something that my third grade teacher said is write something for me like I've never heard, like when you're writing about a peanut butter jelly sandwich, like write like I've never seen what a piece of bread looks like. That is how that's the mindset you have to have when you're thinking about how you create things that are easy for the receiving process, because Walmart's going to defend and say you have to figure it out because we're shipping orders in and our receiving process is fine for X amount of orders for the majority. So again, just make sure it's as clear as possible. If you're trying to dispute it, show that proof of delivery, make sure the PO number is clearly listed, and then show the purchase order for the requested quantities. But again, if we want to get into some of the nitty-gritty details, let's have a conversation. I'll put my email up here now, and we can take like one more question since we're waiting.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest kind of just moving on to the demo here in a little bit, because we've got quite a few questions left. So for everyone, if your question wasn't answered, if we couldn't get time, I think there's about 4 in the Q&A and a few more in the chat still that we didn't have time to get to. Please forward those onto our emails, as you can see right there. And we would love to get back to you that way in the next few days. But thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to move on now to the demo portion of this webinar. So if you would like to stay on to see what kind of solutions SupplyPike has for AP deductions, we're going to go into our Deductions Navigator software demo here in just a bit.
Yeah. Before we jump into that, I did want to make a quick call out. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but Supplier Wiki, we're educational platform for CPG for suppliers. We want to create free, relevant content for all of you and your constituents. So we're doing an in-person. If you're in the Northwest Arkansas area, join us tomorrow. Sign up on our events section on the Supplier Wiki events page. Just scroll all the way to the bottom. That's the in-person one. And we're going to talk about what content y'all want to see, what's helpful, what's not helpful, how we can improve our processes. And if you're not in the Northwest Arkansas area, join us online on December 16th. We're doing a Zoom focus group. We're going to talk to y'all just about what you want to see in the next year. And you can sign up for that under our webinar section. So you might have to click to the second page of all of our webinars that are going on. But please join us for that. We're going to have free lunch if you're in person, and whether you join online or in person, there's a $50 gift card on the table, as well as some other Supplier Wiki swag. So I am going to stop sharing my screen for a second. I'm going to pull up our deductions navigator software. And if this is where you have to jump off, totally understand. We know you guys are super busy, but I just want to show you if this is something that you're interested in using. So we'll go ahead and share this. We'll pop deductions navigator on the screen. All right, so you guys are looking at the deductions navigator solution. So this is how the solution SupplyPike has developed for deductions. And we have different levels of automation for several of the these major retailers. Today we've talked about Walmart, but this product also works for Target. It works for your Kroger AP deductions. It works for your Amazon AP deductions. And then we're expanding into other retailers all the time. So if you have one that you really want, get on a demo with our team and just bombard them and say, I want KE and Unify, and that'll get put into the hat. So with the deductions navigator product, there's kind of two sections. Right now we're looking at the dashboard, and that's really impactful information. It's so suppliers like you guys don't have to pull this information at a high level, but also dig into your data. We've kind of talked about, issues with DCs, knowing the money on the table. This does this for you. And yes, you can access some of this data in Retail Link, but however, it's really easy. It's just right there for you. You never have to pull another spreadsheet when it comes to Deductions Navigator, or at least minimize the amount of spreadsheets you have to pull. So the dashboard gives you a high-level overview. You can see, again, you've disputed this with SupplyPike. This is the amount. This is what the SupplyPike product has approved, and you've won back. One thing I want to call out here, there are alternative solutions, softwares that are similar to us. A lot of them take a percentage of what you win back. That is not the way that SupplyPike does it. The way we do it is a flat monthly subscription, which is not based off size of prize. It's based off the amount of deductions you're pulling in. So if you only have a couple of deductions, you're going to have a lower subscription rather than if you're pulling in, thousands every day. So that's how we base it, not on size of prize, which is really cool. And then this is the deduction percentage of invoices. And this is dummy data. This is our demo account, but I just wanted to call out the average. The industry average here is 6% of invoices are deducted. So that is not a small chunk of change. And this info is just really impactful, especially at a high level. Then we've got, our deductions breakdown. You can see deductions you've received, what's actionable, what you should be looking at, things that you're awaiting payment for, and then total paid back and your dispute win rate. So these are just really helpful. You can see disputes by status, where they're sitting, the dollar amounts of where they're sitting, what you've been paid. So, teasing out the difference between, all right, you won this back, but when is Walmart going to pay you for it is really, really helpful. And then here is the deduction claims by code. So we kind of covered information similar to this. You see these code 25s, code 22s, and code 24s are all at the top. So you can see the count, the number that you're getting dinged with these. So let's say for like code 22s, this is your most prevalent one. It's not the most amount, But again, you can kind of go into this data and dig and understand either why that's happening and dispute it, or understand the validity and understand how to fix that issue in your supply chain. And then we also have just like amounts by deduction by amount. You can filter between amount and count for all these deductions over time, claim lines by item number, the count and amount, and then deductions by location. So if, this DC is the one that's causing you issues, maybe you can explore a little bit more into why that is. Maybe they have vision technology if this DC versus others. Again, just really, this is helpful for understanding the overall information and not having to pull so many manual sheets. So that's the dashboard. If we click over to the deductions, this is where you can really play. And these are interesting to me because you can filter here by dispute readiness. So knowing like, all right, I want to dispute by everything that's invalid, what's likely invalid. We have built this business logic baked in, so you don't actually have to go in and determine validity. We have kind of a scale to understand what is worth going after and what maybe requires more investigation or et cetera. So that's that one. We've got supplier action. What if it's not been disputed, or if it has and you need to continue to act on it. I've got it filtered here to code 22s. Now I'll just filter to all codes. Documents, if you want to filter by document type, if it has it with or without. What's really cool, and I'll click into one of these disputes here in a second, is that it looks like if you click in here that we've pulled in, a couple of the proof documentation for the example. Actually, if you're using our product, it's going to automatically pull in your purchase orders, your invoices, your claim numbers. And then if you want to attach a bill of lading or proof of delivery, which it will also automatically pull in, or something else just to increase it, your chance of validity for or invalid deduction, you can add that in. It gives you all your information. You don't have to go into 7 different apps and pull up tabs. Yeah, it's really helpful. You can see that you're missing a document, so you're not having to build your own checklist. This is creating a checklist for you. It's really interesting just to go in. I'll filter off of all statuses so we can see that if we clicked into, let's do this one, this shows that it's likely invalid, so you're not having to go into that validity. You can add dispute reasons, load number, but here the business logic highlights, hey, you're ready to dispute. You can go ahead and click that submit button and it will send off and then filter back in. We update this data daily, so it's up to date for everything. But other than that, if you're interested, we have free trials where you can pull in your data. You can dispute deductions in the trial period, which is standard 1 to 2 weeks, just depending. So if you're interested, go on to supplypike.com and fill out our free trial. But other than that, I'm really appreciate everyone staying on for the demo and staying through the content today. Sorry that I can't share my face. Sorry about our Wi-Fi issues. But again, thank you all for coming on. Thank you, Peter, for teeing up some great questions. And we hope to see you next week.
Absolutely. See you all later.
Thanks all. Bye. I promise I'm waving. Take care.